2, it's Lane Cooper here, and today I'm bringing you my September reading wrap-up part 2. So I had a really strong start to September, and I had a decent end to September as well. Okay, so technically I read 12 things in the month of September, but 3 of those were short stories that were individual titles, and technically I read the same short story twice in the month just because I loved it so much the first time. I wanted to reread it before my library checkout on it expired. I know. I've been really trying hard not to do any rereads this year. Like, I've kind of been accumulating a stack of books that I want to reread next year, but trying to not reread anything this year, and I blew it for like a little 15-page short story, but it was just so good. So the thing that I reread was technically The Ruin of Gabriel Ashley by KJ Charles, which I mentioned in my last wrap-up. This is a supplementary prequel short story to her Society of Gentlemen trilogy. So yeah, I reread that. It's just really good, you guys. As well as the rest of the series. So after that, I also read books 2 and 3 in the Society of Gentlemen. The second book is called A Seditious Affair. Each of these books deals with a different member of the Ricardians, which is a wealthy gentlemen's society group, and one of their members kind of like falling in love and having an affair with someone. So this book deals with Dominic Frey, who works for the Home Office. He's a pretty traditional gentleman. He's a Tory. He believes in the crown and the government and the rule of gentlemen, all that sort of stuff. He also likes to be dominated in bed, and for the last year he's had a standing Wednesday appointment with a man of a lower class standing who Dominic only knows as the Brute. That's how he refers to him. And they have this little BDSM relationship. The Brute is actually Silas Mason, who is a seditious writer and pamphleteer who is all about overthrowing the peerage and equality and democracy, and the polar opposite of Dominic. And obviously the two men come into conflict when they discover each other's identities and just how like closely tied and antagonistic they are with one another. And it's really good. It's a really solid book. I think technically I gave it like 4 stars on Goodreads. It's probably like 4.5 stars. Like, it's just really solid, and it explores a lot of really interesting relationship dynamics with the dom-sub element in a historical context. It also deals with a lot of politics in Regency England. Specifically, Silas Mason is involved in a subversive group of individuals who are all real historical figures that KJ Charles inserted Mason into their group. And the political stuff that happens with that group is all based on fact. What happens to them is real. And it's, for a story about Regency politics, is disturbingly relevant to the American political system right now. That one was great. Then I read book 3 in the Society of Gentlemen, which is A Gentleman's Position. This is the third and final story. It deals with the leader of the Ricardians, Lord Richard Thane, who has fallen in love with his, I never know how to say this. Like, as an American, I don't know how to say this. Valet? I don't know. Anyways, he's fallen in love with his, I'm going to say valet, who he has told himself he's not allowed to enter into a physical or romantic relationship with because it would be an abuse of his position. And so it just deals with the two of them trying to negotiate their feelings, their positions. There's a ton of drama with the rest of the Ricardians and one of their long-standing enemies, and it's really good. So this book was on my list of books I expected to give 5 stars. I think technically I gave it more like 4.5 stars. It wasn't exactly a 5-star book. For me, Julius, who is one of the romantic heroes from the first book in this trilogy, is still my favorite character of the Ricardians, but I really did enjoy this one a lot. I really enjoyed the emotional connection between Richard and Cyprian, and I think the thing that knocked it down from a true 5-star for me is there's a little bit of a disconnect between the plot in the first half and the plot in the second half. They're very, very different. The first half deals with Lord Richard and his some stuff with his family, And then the plot morphs into this kind of social scandal that isn't to do with his family. It has to do with other members of the society, which I did enjoy that plot, but it just, it felt like we were dealing with kind of two different pieces. So I still loved all of the elements. I love all the characters. I love this universe, but yeah, maybe not quite a 5-star, but it was pretty damn close. Excellent series if you're looking for an romance series set in Regency, England. Highly recommend. I also read another short story. This is called A Private Miscellany. You can receive a copy of this short story if you subscribe to KJ Charles's mailing list, where she sends out information about new releases and stuff like that, which is a series of letters sent between the Ricardians following the third book, and it was great. And A Private Miscellany is the other like short story I read this month. It was only about 30 pages. And then the last thing I read this month was a reread, though it's a reread of a book I read when I was like 10 years old. So that is The Two Princesses of Bomar by Gail, Carson, Levine. You may recognize this author. She also wrote Ella Enchanted, which was incredibly popular if you're like my generation. The Two Princesses of Bomar was a childhood favorite of mine, and I like to talk about it, but I hadn't read it in so long that I went to reread it to make sure I still liked it. Unfortunately, I can say that most of my memory of loving it is nostalgia and the fact that I was a child when I read it. So this book takes place in a fantasy land. There are two princesses. One of them is very courageous. One of them is a little bit cowardly and like quiet. The courageous one falls sick, requiring the cowardly one to find her courage and to go on a quest to try to save her sister. It's a pretty good plot. Reading level, I did check on Scholastic's book site, and depending on which ranking system you go by, it is about half of a grade to a full grade younger on the reading level than Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Since I've read Harry Potter twice, both times as an adult, I like to use that kind of as a gauge of how I examine other fantasy middle grade books, because I actually hold the Philosopher's Stone in really high regard, and since it's not a childhood favorite, I don't really have any nostalgia surrounding it, and I genuinely think that J.K. Rowling's writing in that book is fairly exceptional. It has one of the best beginnings, for instance, of a book that I can think of, and so I use it like a scale or a rubric. So The Two Princesses of Bomar is intended for a slightly younger audience, but not an excessively younger audience. It's also close in word count to The Philosopher's Stone. The writing, however, is just not that great. It's okay. For a young reader, I can see it'd be a very easy read. It has a lot of uplifting themes or good themes about finding courage, but there's nothing especially memorable about the writing. In fact, one of the recurring elements in the book is epic poetry, and the epic poetry portions of the story were frankly terribly written. I don't know why they were so shit. Like, they were genuinely shit. It was like she had written sentences and then she had just hit the enter key after every 2 to 3 words to turn it into epic poetry. Yeah. Would I give it to a young reader? Possibly. I think you have much better options out there to give them like better written books. Also, the ending had this really uncomfortable like evangelical heaven angels motif. Like, that's not what she calls it, but like the parallels are really obvious, and I wouldn't give that to a kid as someone who's an atheist. So the ending wasn't as great as I remembered it. I think because I noticed those elements as an adult. The character who I always in my head remember loving the most, I found really annoying because he didn't really have character development. He just had like a quirk. So yeah, I think if the writing had been better, I would have given it a little bit better rating, but the writing was just unspectacular. So alas, I'll always have a nostalgic feel for it, but unfortunately it's not something that really lives up to an adult reread. That's everything I finished reading in September. In the second half of the month, I really focused on getting some writing done for work, and I also had some migraines and eye issues that prevented me from doing as much reading as I would have liked. I'm still kind of suffering from that. I get ocular migraines in this eye, which is unfortunately also my dominant eye, and it can really screw with my vision and make it difficult to read. You know you're getting older when you can no longer read a book here, which is where your poor eyesight needed you to read it, and you have to read it here so that you don't get a headache. Yeah. But it is what it is. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books or if you're thinking about picking them up. And if you enjoyed this video or any of my other videos, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.